Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Raj Gupta on the show today. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you, Julian.
I've got to know Raj through LinkedIn, and we've both been engaging each other on our posts. And it's great now to, I say not physically meet, but certainly virtually meet and have a conversation and interact in that way. And it's great that we can do that and take things sort of offline in a virtual way. I just want to say Raj is a HR professional. He's the author of 6 books and a global speaker on matters of HR, organizational culture. And it's great to have you on the show today, Raj. And obviously we've been in challenging times, will continue to be in challenging times. And I think more than ever before, culture of an organization really matters. It's always mattered, but I think it's become to more the forefront because culture is about people and individuals that make up that culture. And I just want to get your thoughts on how you're seeing a shift in the conversations you're having about culture and how that may start to be changing for the future.
Thanks, Julian, for having me on the show. Now, culture, when you look at it, it is a facet that touches, entire spectrum of the organization. And I'm a great student of culture. So that is the way I look at it. And when I have done my global assignment, and I was in UK, and that's where when I was trying to work with different cultures, and I did some study. I would have spoken to roughly 25, 26 different nationals all across Europe and UK, and also understood at a broader level the culture that exists within classes. So when I looked at it, 2 to 3 things that came into play in terms of overall culture when we look at it. We carry this unconscious bias. So it becomes imperative for us to be self-aware about our own unconscious bias, because there are ways in which people from Asia work. There are ways in which people from Europe work. There are ways in which people from UK and America work. So understanding those nuances is critical, because at times the way we conduct ourselves in Asia is absolutely different the way American will conduct themselves at the workplace, or maybe a German will do that. So that is one thing. Second, what I realized, I picked up during my stint in UK, I picked up German language. Now, when you learn a language, it not only helps you connect with those nationals better, but it also helps you develop multiplicity of perspective. You shift from one language to another. So beyond culture, beyond that connect, your perspectives also develop. So when I look at largely from organization standpoint, it is imperative from leaders for leaders to first seek to understand before they are understood. So as I said, unconscious bias, seek to understand before you are understood. And third biggest thing that I learned, that we need to be persuasive in our communication. So when we take cognizance of unconscious bias, seek to understand before we are understood, and we are persuasive in our approach, things happen. But if we go with authority, if we try to go via a command and control route, it will not work. So like, there is a famous quote by Peter Drucker. It says, culture eat strategy for breakfast. Now, whatever you say in the boardroom or in your corner offices, unless and until you walk the talk, it will not work out. So the real test of culture that you want to
Mm.
permeate through the organization comes in when nobody is watching you. So you do and say things when somebody is
Mm.
in front of you, and you do and say things when nobody is watching you. So that is a real test uh, of culture that you want to permit as a leader in the organization.
Mm.
Nobody is watching you. So these are my initial thoughts, Julian, about.
Well, I mean, there are some amazing just gems of insight there right now. Um, I just want to just pick up on that whole unconscious bias, and it's a thing that it's there, and as it is, it's unconscious, so we have to make it conscious. And I think it's become probably more relevant. You talked about kind of cross-cultural, because we are interacting. The fact that you're in India and I'm in the UK, and we're having these conversations. Businesses have got, certainly over the last number of years, a lot more global and a lot more cross-cultural not just in the locations in the countries, but the fact that they're interacting with global teams. So how do we take that unconscious bias? Because that's really a vital part of building a culture of growth. Is how do we make it more conscious? How do you make people get an awareness of their bias?
I think I can share my own example
Yeah.
because I was, in a large team of 15, 20 HR people. I was the only Asian. And I was talking to my leader. I said, why don't you use authority to drive certain things? And that's where he said, use your persuasive communication. And I was feeling slightly jittery that things are not happening the way that I was accustomed to. It's
Mm.
not about right or wrong, with the speed, So, uh, uh, so in so in that context, when I got conscious about my own unconscious bias,
Mm.
so I needed to remind me every day about it, and it took me roughly 9 months. It's not about just talk, it's all about that thought should not come in your subconscious.
Mm.
Those assumptions should not come into your mind. So so it took me roughly 9 months, and a lot of understanding of people, meeting with people from various countries, and then I started slowly and steadily appreciating where they are coming from.
Mm.
Now I'll give you a very normal example in day to day office life. If a boss says, Raj, you do this, in Indian context, uh, so we'll say, okay, I'll do it, even if it is. But in some cultures, if you tell your subordinate that do this, that person will say, you told me to do those three things. I have to leave at 5 o'clock. Which one you would like me to prioritize?
Yeah.
Now, does that come naturally to one set of culture? Answer could be yes, but to other set of culture, it could be Herculean task to say this to their leadership. So
Mm.
how do you understand, as a leader, that you have that bias? Because when you're at a leadership, you get less of opportunities to get a feedback.
Mm.
Ego also come into play. So you cannot use same parameters for people coming from X country with Y
Mm.
country. And it's not just about culture, it's about generations also. So the way you treat or work with senior people in terms
Yeah.
of their age and experience versus digital natives is altogether different. So your ability to be self-aware
Mm.
becomes critical, and this unconscious bias doesn't go. You just say, I have understood I have unconscious bias. It roughly took me 9 months of a constant practice, and every time I was selling, you have to see it from their point of view.
Yeah.
So seek to understand before you are understood.
That's great.
So
And I guess it's that, almost when you're interacting with those people and those situations, and I do a lot of this when I coach leaders, that I get them to start to almost play back those situations again and reflect. And as you reflect, you then start to observe things that you didn't observe in the moment. And you start to pick up insights, and then you start to realize, actually, I did have an unconscious bias there, and then work out strategies of way to develop that self-awareness. So when you interact again, you get a better sort of communication, because the reality is you are who you are, and you've been impacted through your lifetime and experience. It's then using that awareness of other people, and then trying to create a better, I suppose, flow of communication and interaction with that awareness, isn't it?
Yes, it has to become part of your inner core. So when we talk about leadership, we talk about the inner core, the value system, the courage, the character, the curiosity part of it. So unless it becomes part of your character, it should automatically happen to you that you are not making any assumption about people. So in my view and recommendation, once you get conscious about your unconscious biases, work on it. Take that as a project, and train your mind to reach to a stage that you want to reach at.
Brilliant. So it's an ongoing thing, isn't it? It's that ongoing self-awareness, self-discovery, and constantly feeding back and changing, because it's that's how we should approach our everyday of learning new things about ourselves and others, isn't it?
Yes, but first 6 months, if you do it, then habits are formulated. So it becomes part of your inner core, and once it is part of your inner core, it doesn't happen to you. So you can see it. I use this analogy of, let's say, a boss tells you to go and touch a tree, and in one culture, person will just run and touch it. Right? In a different culture, somebody will say, okay, now let's get together, and understand and identify who is the person who will go and touch. Now, maybe in another culture, they will go to the next level and they say, are there any impediments before we touch it?
Yeah.
So these are finer nuances that we need to take cognizance of. And after few quarters of practice, it happens automatically. So it's not a lifelong. You need to continue to work on this. It becomes part of your I call it robotic automation of this unconscious bias that was having. You don't have that bias any further.
No, sure. And so we're obviously in a time, I mean, businesses have always been changing, and we're always appreciation of change. Now we are obviously all experiencing change on a grander scale, and not in a doom and gloom way now, but more just things are changing and adapting for how things are. What sort of, I guess there's two questions. What sort of culture do we need to develop for the future, and how do we go about developing that culture that will help us continue to grow and continue to thrive as organizations?
I think if you look at it, the change, when I look at it, this acronym called SMAC, SMAC, Social Mobility Cloud Analytics, it was already disrupting in the business 4.0 scenario. The virtual reality, augmented reality, deep learning, robotic process automation were already talked about. People were already talking about coexistence of bots, robots with human being. So I'm talking about pre-COVID time. So people were already talking about, man-to-machine ratio instead of span of control. People were already talking, going beyond time and material kind of models to outcome-based models. So that change was already happening. Now, what this COVID scenario has done, it has accelerated the change. And it has commoditized digital. So digital is no longer a luxury. Now leadership needs to take cognizance of the shift in the ecosystem that has happened, a rapid shift. So the way, the post-COVID scenario, the future of work and workplaces, when we used to go to work, The objective of workplace was to develop camaraderie, collaboration, engagement, trust. Now, can this be done in the current context? Answer is no. Now, how do we develop camaraderie, collaboration, trust, engagement? What we were doing in a physical space through a virtual, leveraging virtual tools. So, how do we bring that experience of physical to virtual? Becomes one of the challenge.
Yeah.
For leadership. So that's one. And another key thing that I see for leaders, time has gone, wherein there was a command and control way of working. Now, leaders needs to make sure that they are curious. They need to shift their focus that from I know all to I need to learn all.
Yes.
Because as a leader, when you're talking to people, you have certain experience and position as well. So you tend to talk, from that experience and shoot down ideas. It is important that from know it all to need to learn all, that kind of shift happens, and that's where the self awareness within the leadership team comes into play. So otherwise, if you don't take conscious measures to address that, and walk the talk, then a culture is created which is not conducive to and do not enhance productivity, etc. So instead of creating a follow-up culture, it is imperative for leaders to be self-aware. The more self-aware they are, more curious they are, things will happen over a period of time. If you walk the talk. So like in kids also, we say your kid will not respect you for what you say. They will not listen if you tell them anything. They will also see whether you are doing it or not. Are you walking the talk? That becomes important.
Absolutely. Right. And it's interesting you mentioned that point about leaders not knowing everything and being in that position of learning, and it's leadership that becomes more vulnerable because they don't always know the answers. And certainly I've spoken to a lot of leaders over this last few months who have felt they needed to know, and I've said to them, but you don't know, we don't know, and it's okay to lead with a bit of unknown, and actually you'll be more respected for it. And in fact, it creates more of a culture of working as a collaborative organization, because actually a lot of the knowledge and the wisdom will actually be within the people. And if you create that sort of vulnerability, and people then will share and be open to, actually, I'm happy to participate here. I know he's still lead, I know he's still visible, or she, but actually he's allowing and empowering me to come up with some ideas which perhaps they've not thought of, because of I'm looking at it from a different perspective. And I think that sort of learning ability needs to be so much had. I mean, how are you finding getting leaders into that place? Because we're talking now and we know it, and not that we're both doing it, but how do we get leaders to that place of saying, stop being sort of command and control and feeling you have to know everything, to a place of it's okay to be unknown, be more in a learning approach?
I think the kind of shift that we are witnessing now, for centuries we have not witnessed that shift. So generally, it's like your parents are passing on to you the knowledge. Now this has shifted, exponentially now. So with digital native coming into play, so in my view, leaders needs to become followers or apprentice as and when required. Now to do that, equanimity plays a critical role. Equilibrium plays a critical role in their own mind or psyche. Their ability to shift. So one side, they are leading a pack of, a vice president, for example, and on the other side, they are apprenticing to a digital native who is a young fellow of, let's say, 20, 22 years. So can leader do that? So it depends on individual leader. I bring back the same thing. Are they self-aware?
Yes.
Right. So when they conduct themselves, when they are in a position of authority, can they self-control?
Yeah.
So some of those things become critical for leaders to reflect on, and the leaders who reflect will grow and make a larger impact. So one of the biggest thing I see for leaders in times to come, beyond the outcomes that are expected from them, they need to start getting self-aware. And once they are self-aware, some of these things will automatically start happening. So equanimity, equilibrium will play a critical role for them, because after a point of time, all CEOs will retire.
Yeah.
Right. So that feeling of humility, because you could be ex-CEO of multi-billion-dollar organization, but you're a human being.
Exactly.
So humility is also a critical aspect to it if you want to bring about that change. So few things that I've touched upon is, being self-aware, equanimity, equilibrium of your mindset, and becoming as a follower. So leader as a follower is going to be critical.
So developing that culture of, whether it's an empowering culture, a growing culture, a culture that's focused on humans, as always, it all starts with the leaders, and it all starts with, because I think often I've been in organizations where people have tried to take it from the ground upwards of a culture, and it just doesn't work, because it's got to be it's not a command and control top down, that mindset, but it's got to be through leadership that will embrace it, and then other people will see it as well. And you made that quote earlier on where that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I think it's organizations getting more into a state of thinking about culture as opposed to strategy. And I was interviewing the other day a lady who talked about human-centric leadership, and actually by being more human-centric, you will actually create a great culture, but also you will hit the bottom line, because obviously leadership often gets too concerned with the numbers and the financials, and that's obviously important because you also want to make a business sustainable, but actually going through the people, you will make it more sustainable than ever before. And so that's really valid. Is there anything else you'd just like to add, anything else on what people who are trying to develop that culture right now, what other sort of one or two ideas, tips, strategies that they could put in place?
I think one of the things I keep hearing in corporate world is empowerment. So leader says, you are empowered to do anything. And I say, you are empowered to do anything, but before doing anything, check with me. So it doesn't work that way. So if you empower people, you have to empower them and make them accountable. So you can't say you are empowered, but check with me before doing anything. Similarly, I see people say we have an open culture. Anybody can talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And and suddenly when somebody reaches out, you say, "Did you talk to your direct manager before coming to me?" So we need to reflect on some of these conundrums. Some leaders have said, "I have an open door policy." Now people will shit in their pants before even knocking their door for a meeting, because so it is incumbent on us as a leader to make sure that people feel we are approachable, we are easy to connect with. So for that, your actions will speak rather than words. So walk the talk becomes extremely critical in my view.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it goes back to that fundamental thing is of leading by example. And I think people don't realize the impacts that actually leading by example and how people will see and imitate not only what you do and how you say things and how they connect, but they also feel your values and everything about you. And it's one of the things that we're not told to do is to almost role model in that sense, but actually it's more impactful than actually telling somebody, educating somebody, to put them on a course is the best way. You know, if you're saying one thing and doing the same thing, people subconsciously know that aligns or disaligns, and if it aligns, it creates that sense of trust and integrity, and it really does start to gel a team and create that momentum of trust and then an empowerment and everything else. So yeah, the role modeling, leading by example is fundamental. And you mentioned that, you know, we walk the talk, so to speak. It's quite almost a cliche statement, but actually there's a lot of power in that statement in itself. And I think people often forget to do that. And they get too caught up in sophisticated things in leadership. And it's not that sophisticated really, is it? I really liked talking to you, Raj, and I really appreciate all your experiences. I love the insights on leadership and on culture, and look forward to seeing more stuff that you post on LinkedIn. And I'm sure I'll have more conversations with you like this. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and giving up your time. Thank you very much.
It has indeed been a privilege and pleasure both, virtually meeting you. Thank you so much, Jude.
Brilliant. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you.